thank you everybody for joining us today. We're doing this Women in Systems Thinking series. We are recording, and this recording will be sent to those who have registered for this event. Just to set the context a little bit, this is it the fourth or fifth? It's the fifth in our series. And we have one more that we'll tell you about toward the end of the program, one more in January, one more speaker. And we've kind of organized this a little bit like systems thinking, systems being, systems doing. And so Lydia and Anne are our first of two systems doing. How do you actually apply systems thinking? And of course, as many of you know, permaculture, biodynamic, agriculture, these sort of very systemsy based practices are a way for us to participate in the systems that are happening all around us and help them to be more holistic and life friendly and supportive rather than life degrading. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of our agenda. We're just starting with the intros, and then Anne and Lydia will lead us in a short grounding exercise, and then they have a presentation that we'll start off with, and then we'll have some breakouts after the presentation, and that'll be around the top of the hour. And then we'll have a sharing from breakout, and then official Q&A, and then we will wrap up around what will be 11:30 Pacific time. So our event is an hour and a half. Please take care of yourselves during the event. If you need to turn your camera off or on or whatever and what have you, feel free to send us chat messages. We don't want to keep the chat too loud during the presentation. We try to kind of keep it down to a dull roar so that we can focus on the presenters. But if you have a question, you're certainly welcome to send us a message. So just to introduce our speakers, their organization is called Vital Cycles. And so it's an education and design partnership between Lydia Neilsen and Anne Friewald in Santa Cruz, California, as we mentioned. And they're focused on engaging with and understanding ourselves as nature and how we can enact practices and functional systems toward planetary and personal regeneration. They bring together extensive backgrounds in community health and permaculture education and activism. Their deep curiosity about the interconnectivity of the planet and her people inspires an integration of the health of the land and the health of the individual through their teaching. Anne and Lydia bring a positive, action-based perspective that highlights skills, practices, and resources necessary for growth, creativity, and vitality in person and place. They have co-authored and teach their signature course, Vital Cycles, a PINA, recognized permaculture design certificate course, with an additional focus on human ecology. They give numerous talks and short workshops throughout the Bay Area and also collaborate with regenerative economist Della Duncan for seasonal workshops called HUM, a weekend of song, connection, and regeneration, combining singing, permaculture, human ecology, and Joanna Macy's work that reconnects. And for those of you who have been with us in this series, you know that Joanna Macy was our speaker for the last event. So with that, I would like to invite Anne and Lydia to say hello and lead us in our grounding exercise.
Hey everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, let's get ourselves all grounded together. We're all little squares all over the country and the world. And so through breath and some light visualization, just bring ourselves, our hearts and minds together before we start presenting. So we use, in the work that we do, we use an alchemical mandala. And the alchemical mandala honors and celebrates the elements of earth, which is at the bottom and goes up through air, water, air, and fire, and then repeats, non-linear and also non-circular, as it's actually could be a spiral in and a spiral out. So we want to bring you all there with us, because a lot of how we think and present and synthesize is using this transformative map of the elements. So let's just start. If you have your legs crossed, uncross your legs. Making room for your spine to be nice and straight, and just start with breathing in and feeling our bellies rise.
So think about your connection to the earth, your groundedness. Feel your roots coming out of your feet, out of your spine, down into the earth, really holding you solid and strong.
And as you feel so comfortable there, we all know that it's not always, don't always have to stay there. And so feel the movement and some flow where maybe, and most likely our grounded beliefs lead us to some curiosity and some flow and some change.
As you embrace your flow and your change, take a deep breath in and out, and recognize the paradoxes of the world and the beautiful, wondrous, and sometimes uncomfortable moments of realizing that everything you thought you knew is actually something else also true. Oh, the joys of reversal.
And as we go and we move into fire, taking another deep breath and really feeling that passion we all hold when we've gone through transformation, whether we've sought it or not. What does that feel like in our bodies? That passion, that vision, that wild vision that moves us forward with new understanding and new curiosities and new values and understanding that bring us back again into earth.
And as you find yourself back with your grounded, rooted self, just open your eyes. And here we all are.
Thank you very much. All right. So we will move on now to the official presentation portion of our event today. And Anne and Lydia, when we were preparing for this event, we had suggested that perhaps I start us off with a couple of questions. Does that still make sense, or does it make sense for you guys to kind of launch into your presentation?
Well, we're really curious about what your questions are, Felicia. So.
Great. Well, really, I just have maybe one or 1.5 questions. But I'm sure there's plenty more. But the main thing is, if you could, for me and for our participants, and I'm sure you'll do this with your presentation as well, but just to start us off, really linking, like, why should we as either systems thinkers or aspiring systems thinkers or systems thinking sympathizers, why should we, care about permaculture? Like, how can we really explicitly make that link between that, sort of horizontal, really in the dirt doing, and this, as I mentioned in our preparatory call, as systems thinkers, we really like oftentimes the abstract, or we can at least get caught up in it, in the models and the systems and the thinkiness. So if you could kind of talk a little bit about that, how do we bridge from that world of the intellectual to that world of the applied and the really engaged with nature, even if it's just in our yards?
Great question.
That's a great question. So many ways to answer.
Yeah.
Well,
permaculture is really about the tools and strategies and the techniques of doing, but it requires a shift in the way that you think. So we really spend a lot of time in our courses on this paradigm shift in our thinking in order to be able to make the good decisions in the doing. So
yeah, that's a great answer.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good answer, because I think a lot of what you just asked, Felicia, is you're going to find answered, like you said, throughout this presentation. Yeah, and we could start off with this quote.
Yeah,
we could start off just also an answer to that, a quotation from Donella Meadows. She said, "There are no separate systems. The world is a continuum. Where to draw a boundary around a system depends on the purpose of the discussion." Right. And so, and again, it also depends not only on the purpose of the discussion, but as Donella Meadows also brought out beautifully, is what is our goal? And so in permaculture, we're constantly, we're looking into the future, and everything that we are designing, how we're conceptualizing things is looking into the future. It's not just about, oh, I'm going to go and plant a tree today, right? It's with the full context of understanding all of the systems that are in play with just the planting of that tree, and understanding that action goes well into the future, has the potential to.
Yes.
Okay. So with no further ado, are we ready to start, Felicia?
That sounds great. Thank you both.
Okay, so we're going to share screen. We practiced this many times, and just, Zoom is what it is. So this is just an interesting, everyone sees the full screen? This is more of our test before we start. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So as Felicia just said, we are Vital Cycles. We focus on permaculture, human ecology, and regenerative design. Today, we're going to be talking about soil, water, plants, and climate, and how we actually, as our individual selves, as in partnership, in community, actually have the ability to enact profoundly wonderful impacts on our climates, our microclimates, our neighborhood climates, and our regional climates. Okay, so since we're speaking to permaculture, we want to, just in case people don't have familiarity, just sort of start off with some basics around that. So in permaculture, we work always within the context of our principles, which are here to the left, which are earth care, people care, and fair share. So earth care, we can speak a moment to that. So really that's just about caring for the earth. And so the ethics, by the way, they are our guiding considerations for everything that we do out in the world, how we engage and how we interact. So earth care being the first. So is this doingness that we are now, is this caring for the earth? Have we been able to really understand all of the cycles at play here that are important for holistic care of the earth?
And as Anne pointed out, it's all about thinking into the future. So is this earth care now and in the future, or is this really more short-sighted?
Yeah, can I do people care?
So people care, we often say people care is the hardest part. This is the honoring and the understanding and the tending of all people, no matter where they are on their pathway through the various stages of human consciousness. Are they already ready to work for the earth, or are they maybe still in a different position? So how can we honor everyone where they're at and be accepting and open and ready to move forward with everyone in collaboration and cooperation?
Which, as we all know, can be challenging, right? So
Yes.
again, to that, we will talk a lot about slowing everything down. And with the people care part, that's a really good place to slow down and just observe for a while and listen, and to truly listen. And then the last one is fair share. And again, as a consideration for our doingness in the world, we can look out and see examples of a lot of doingness that does not take this ethic into consideration, right? And so as we are working and doing out in the world, this is about not just like fair trade or fair share. It's really what are we giving and what are we receiving, and is it balanced? And if we have so much, if we have enough food growing in our gardens, then who are we going to be able to share that with? What sort of systems of collaboration and share can we build and co-create within our community?
And we focus a lot on this idea of designing for distribution, right? So fair share is really about reinvesting your surplus for the good of the larger entities involved.
So, okay, so then the permaculture principles. So there are 26 original principles. These are just ones we thought were good for today. And we're going to send you handouts of these slides for later. So we're not going to speak to each of these, but we just want to give you a flavor.
These were sort of our favorites for today.
But just when if you're looking at them right now, so one of our teachers and friends, Hazel Ward up at Siskiyou Permaculture, introduced this idea that the principles of permaculture, they're stories. Right? They're stories. They're not a part of a recipe. There's not something, they're really, you want to take each principle and apply them to the unique situation, the unique part of the planet Earth that you are able to be tending. And what story does each of these principles elicit in this unique space?
Exactly. They have a universality to them, but there is no recipe. There's no way to say you do this every time, because you have to observe and sink in and hear what each situation needs and requests for each moment.
Okay.
It makes it fun.
Yeah. Any questions about these, actually, since it seems like we're a small enough group? If there are any questions in the chat that came up about that?
We'll be mentioning these as we go through, so that's why we're not really addressing them individually right now.
Okay, good. So here we go. Actually, you know what? Well, anyway, so here's a big busy slide with a lot of words. We'll just gonna out ourselves right now that we don't normally do PowerPoints. It's not our favorite. We have flip charts and drawings and whiteboards, and so it's always a really interesting process for us. But just to start off, we wanted to start by saying that again, this idea of systems and everything being connected. What we find is, so in permaculture, yes, it makes sense when we're teaching or sharing about permaculture that we're going to do a day on soil and a day on water and a day on plants. But in the last 4 years, as we've been doing this, we realized, like, oh, oops, we started talking about soil, and then, well, we can't really talk about soil without talking about water. And then we try to have a day on water, and well, same thing happens, and the same thing with plants. And so we started realizing that the way that our mass culture and the world addresses climate silos these soil, water, and plant cycles or systems. And if we're going to try to address soil without also fully understanding and acknowledging and even having reverence for the cycles of water and plants, we're not going to get as far. Right. So so that's why, we put it together. We love doing this. That's what we're going to do today. And so we wanted to just say, when we do this, okay, when we do take soil, water, and plants and look at them together, their own unique cycles, and yet how their cycles overlap, we get we get better outcomes.
We get these compounding benefits.
So
yeah. So we know when we've hit on a good solution, when it solves multiple problems or addresses multiple problems. So that's what we're always striving for, is what are the techniques and strategies for this place that actually heal soil, water, and plants and climate all at the same time.
And we're not going to read through these either, but just to give you some ideas that these are the benefits of addressing all of them together. Uh-oh. There we go. So we just are giving you some eye candy, right? We're going to start off by talking about soil, and again, looping it all together. So if you don't want to look at this, you don't have to, but soil, right? What's the difference between dirt and soil, and what are the main things that we need to understand and really embody to really work well with soil?
And so, in the vein of our combined theme here, the key to soil is its capacity to hold water and support plant life, right? So how do you facilitate soil being able to hold water and support plant life? And that's really a lot about the structure of the soil. And soil structure comes from the various ways that life incorporates carbon with those mineral elements of soil.
Right. And so when you understand that, when you understand the importance of carbon and healthy soil, it's really important to understand then the 3 phases of carbon. The 3 phases of carbon, guess what, involve water and plants. So let's look at the 3 phases of carbon really quickly. So and we've known this, but we want to just put a shout out to Dr. Christine Jones, who's a soil scientist from Australia, who we love, and she's definitely worth looking up. So the 3 phases of carbon, there's one is in the air. So we all heard about the carbon up in the air and how we don't actually want to have it up in the air anymore.
Too much in there.
So it's up in the air. And so then the plants, through photosynthesis, take in the carbon from the air, and they create a solid. Right, so they create their leaves, they became branches, stems, and then after that, so that's the second phase, is the solid, and then we get into liquid carbon. And if you've never heard of liquid carbon before, we all need to know about liquid carbon and talk about it at every party that we go to, because liquid carbon is what when the plant has photosynthesized and they're done, they form exudates. And these exudates are basically liquid carbon. And this is food for the millions, billions of microbes that are living in healthy soil.
Yeah, so these are actually like sugary, carbony chains molecularly that are the favorite food of these soil microbes. So plants are actually exuding microbe food out of their roots and calling those microbes in. And when they come and eat these carbonaceous substances and incorporate them into their bodies and then die and then get eaten by somebody else who dies, they actually convert the soil structure from this kind of dead mineral into this complex of different mineral sizes holding on to each other through these secretions from the live organisms.
Yeah, so super exciting, right? And the exudates also, these soil exudates, this is how topsoil is formed, right? Without these exudates, there's no topsoil. And these exudates and this liquid carbon will last longer and are more, stable in the soil for far longer. So this is where we're going with soil, right? We want to make sure that we're giving plants what they need in order to bring in the carbon from the air and put it back into the soil.
And this structure that gets created makes the soil like a sponge. Like you can just imagine a kitchen sponge, and that sponge is able to hold water because it has all of these spaces in it. And then there's also air in there, and then all of the other complex interactions with these microbes that actually support plant health and resilience.
And so we mentioned the microbes, right? And so what we like to talk about with soil too is say it a little bit differently. So people say that they're feeding their plants. And so to this end, we're actually, what we need to be doing is feeding our soil and understanding that if we're feeding our soil what it needs, then the plants will have what it needs to do to bring the carbon back from the air.
Yeah. So the take home on soil is creating structure through life so that it can hold water and be a sponge, as well as all of these other compound benefits.
Right. And just to say on soil, we wanted to just say, so right now in California, I don't know where you all are, we're in a major drought. And what people are being told is to stop watering the landscape, right? And so again, just to this end and understanding soil systems or soil cycles, this is the worst advice that can be given actually at this time, because what's happening is that people's gardens, forests, places are drying out. And so dry soil does not hold water, right? And you can see this when you have your house plant that maybe you all never do this. If you haven't watered it for a little while and then you go to water it and all the water just goes to the side, because that soil, when it's dry, the water will just go around it.
It actually repels water when it's dry. Yeah, the microbes have gone dormant, then the structure is crusty and hard.
Right, so then when it rains, that's when we get flooding on a grand scale, because that dry soil can't absorb the water that's coming into it. And so that's why this cycle of drought and flood we keep seeing. And so the idea for us, we'll talk about the DIYs and how much you can do, is really to keep our soil moist as much as we can. And there's so many ways we can do this on our own. So, okay, so now
moving into water.
So we really like to talk about planting water or growing rain, right? So again, getting people to understand that that's how it works.
That's right. So right now it rains and most of that water just runs off immediately into drains, into rivers or creeks, or then back to the ocean. And our landscapes have become drier and drier and drier and drier. And then they're not able to support the plant life that's really holding the planet together and facilitating our stable climate. And so, so we have to kind of go back to the hydrologic cycle and help people understand that we've cut off that underground phase when no water can soak into the earth. And water can't soak in when the soil is dry and has no structure. So how do we simultaneously get that soil structure and create opportunities for the water to soak in?
Yeah, and so to that end, we'll talk about some of the strategies, right? So we're really looking right now, one of our main activities right now is gray water. And we'll talk more about gray water in a moment. And for those of you who don't know about gray water is just reused water, right? So we all have this infrastructure that we've all paid through taxes that pumps tens of thousands of gallons of water to all of our homes every day. And in California, again, so we're going to be very California centric right now, because it's a huge issue for us. Again, people say we have no water just because it's not falling from the sky, but we have water in all of our homes all the time. So gray water is the ability to take that and put it out on the landscape again. If you have water restrictions, you can at least keep the soil around any area that you are blessed to tend moist.
Yeah, I mean, currently every household is throwing away hundreds of gallons a day, and then we're crying about how dry everything is. So this way that we are advocating for the gray water and then having the gray water go into depressions or trenches or mulch basins near plants on the landscape is really allowing the soil structure to develop and holding the water that we've already transported, already paid for, and already used only just a little bit.
And another thing that we want to talk about, the riverscape restoration. Yeah. So the other piece of our work that we've been really interested in is riverscape or waterscape restoration. And this is really important as well, because so many of our waterways, they're not very much appreciated. A lot of times that's where our garbage gets dumped. That's where people dump toxins. So riverscape, even creek stream restoration is a really important piece of where we are right now. We love the beaver. And so y'all can't go run out. The doing this is not going all out and running and get a beaver, because you can't do that. Although being able to advocate for beavers and understanding the impacts of beavers, the positive impacts of beavers on waterscape restoration is also something that we're really big on right now.
That's right. And we're also able to mimic beaver activity and really help transform our waterways from how they've currently been turned into drains, and really restore them into these nourishing bodies for replenishing our groundwater and our aquifers and holding the soil in our landscapes for fire resistance and maintaining the health of our forests, and just keeping groundwater available for any kind of agricultural or ranching activity as well.
Yeah. So again, we're going to be giving you strategies moving forward, just giving you a large picture now.
But this might be a good time to just bring up the idea of slowing everything down.
Yes, we mentioned this earlier.
Yes.
So if you get nothing else, just for the cycles that we're talking about, everything does, as Lydia just said, everything needs to slow down.
Right.
Right. So again, if we went back to soil, people want to work with soil, they dig up soil and they put it at the dump. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, how about let's do some observation. Mm-hmm. Let's look at the soil. Are there bugs in here? Is there life in here? Are we finding any of the mycorrhizal fungi? And if you don't know what that is, we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. Getting to know it, everything needs to be slowed down.
That's right.
How we interact especially needs to be slowed down.
Yes. So allowing humans to make their decisions more slowly, like as you develop a design, let it emerge. Don't think you have to figure it all out and install it in a week, but let things unfold and be responsive to change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And just like, and this slowing down, this isn't about hoarding, about like taking all the water and holding it somewhere else. It's just about letting it move through all of its phases and all of the ways that it can interact at a very slow regenerative pace, so that it can interact a lot. It can interact as much as possible.
Yeah. Okay. And this is just a water scape here on a farm where actually the farmer, all of a sudden, some beavers turned up, and the neighbors too. And the neighbors didn't like the beavers and want to get rid of the beavers, but he let the beavers stay, and the beavers just formed these beautiful, kept the meanders. And kept the meanders going, and kept some localized flooding going that he could then use on his farm. It's just a beautiful. We can send it.
Well, the beaver structures really slow the water down, right? Push it out to the sides, make it move through woody material and organic mini plugs, in order to let it soak in and interact.
Okay. So here we go. Here we are. This is on our plants. And so this is actually the garden that we tend here in Santa Cruz, a garden that we tend in Santa Cruz, right outside the window here. And so when we're thinking about plants, this is basically what could be called a multi-layer food forest. And if anyone's familiar with permaculture, the whole idea of a food forest is really common. And a lot of people have the idea that a food forest means food for people, right? And there is some food for people actually in this picture here, but more importantly, there is food. There's an abundance of food for pollinators, for birds, right? For all different kinds of pollinators, the bees, the butterflies, moths,
lizards, snakes.
Yeah, there's a spider out there that doesn't live a lot of places that I just happened to find one day. So this type of garden is one that feeds our souls, our bodies, and feeds habitat and the wildlife around us. And so really when we're thinking about planting, and planting strategy is a permaculture principle, actually, it's really, again, not just what's going to feed me, right? But what's going to feed all the beings that I want to even call in. Like, for example, this year we got really into butterflies, monarchs in the last couple of years over COVID. And this year it was like, ooh, what about the swallowtails?
Mhm.
So we looked up swallowtail and we planted giant bronze fennel, and it's actually right here
on the left.
under here on the left. And lo and behold, right? Plant it and they do come. We had so many swallowtail caterpillars on this bronze fennel this year, right? And it's just going to come back. And it's so everything in this particular part of the garden, it's all just comes back. It's all self-sustaining. It gets very little water because it's all connected with roots. And so even in the middle of a drought, this is what this garden looks like still.
Yes.
Still right
it's
now.
Still beautiful like that right now. And this is a great time to really talk about the aesthetics and the messiness of intact, healthy systems, right? Like everything's growing into everything. And for some people that's hard, like, oh, I would like things to be more tidy, right? But what happens in this messy interconnected system is that everybody's shading everybody's holding on to the moisture in the soil, everybody's dropping leaves that are protecting the soil from further evaporation and supporting so many different kinds of creatures. So even if you have some aphids or some caterpillars that are just chowing down on your leaves or your food that you want for yourself, there's also the predators for those insects in there thriving away. And it's probably many of you already know, when we try to kill the so-called pest organisms, we actually have a bigger impact on their predators. And the pests come back right away, robust and resilient, but the pest predators have taken a really hard hit. So we actually push ourselves in the wrong direction with a lot of our conventional so-called solutions. So this beautiful, messy, interactive garden are all of these beings in a community, helping each other out, supporting each other. It really is about cooperation and not competition.
Right. And we don't see messy here, but we know that some people do. And just to also say, just to add some beauty to this, when you go outside next, if you didn't know this already, that our eyes, the cones in our eyes were actually created to see more shades of green than any other color, right? So just think about that as humans. Why might that be? And so in this one little snapshot here, there's so many levels of green there. And I find it's just relaxing, right? It's really beautiful type of therapy, get away from the computer and just go sit outside and see how just take in all the green.
Talk about reducing your blood pressure, right? Like watching all of the insects and the birds just fly and flutter around and in and out of all the flowers and everything. It's so grounding and soothing, and has really kept us sane through the last few years of a little bit of craziness.
Yeah, and also to that end, last thing that we want to mention is native plants. So most of the plants in this picture too, not all of them, but several of them are native. And so when we're thinking about plants, with plants, we want to facilitate. Right? We facilitate plants and in that plant diversity, right? So again, we want to use native plants and plant as many native plants as we can. Again, this is California centric, sorry, but out there, wherever you are, if you're in Portugal or wherever Massachusetts, we all have our own native plants. And we want to find out what they are so that we can plant them to support our native bee populations, our native butterfly populations, our native bird populations, all of which are taking a huge hit right now with the increase in monocropping and hardscaping and that. So we're really wanting to acknowledge and love up our natives and have as many natives and as much diversity as we can.
And those native plants are the best suited to grow and thrive in our native soils. So they require less in terms of amendments and things like that. And they also are best suited to our rainfall patterns, even though those are changing. They actually, the native plants have a much better adaptation even. And so the interactions between the plants and the soil with the particular water patterns of your site where you are, those are all intimate and evolved over millions of years. And so we can make life easier for ourselves by going back to that and really honoring that, what's already been figured out.
Yeah, and just all of this is apropos for another quotation by Donna Vanilla Meadows that we're going to throw in that we love. And so she says, let's face it, the universe is messy. It is nonlinear, turbulent, and chaotic. It is dynamic. It spends its time in transient behavior on its way to somewhere else, not in a mathematically neat equilibria. It self-organizes. Check, this is self-organization. It self-organizes and evolves. It creates diversity, not uniformity. That's what makes the world interesting. That's what makes it beautiful. And that's what makes it work.
Yeah. So
Yes.
these functional relationships that we see here, the way that everybody is interacting, this is all essential. And this is a macrocosm of a microcosm and a microcosm of a larger macrocosm. Yeah.
Okay. So now hit on plans. And so this, okay, again. So when we first, I'm trying to get so what are we looking at here? So if we, again, we're bringing together soil, water, plants to what end? To climate, because climate is big. It's on everybody's radar right now, right? It's climate change. And so this is just showing, this is a really interesting lens that we try to bring to people as much as we can. And this is that when we are addressing soil, water, and plants together, we actually create cooler, more lush, abundant landscapes, and on every level, from gardens to patios to neighborhoods to cities. And so what you're looking at here, so this organization is Rain for Climate out of Slovakia. Yes.
Yes, some Czech scientists and some Slovakian scientists doing a lot of work in Europe.
Yeah, and this makes us really want to have a drone that lets us do this all around.
Infrared drone.
It's an infrared drone. So what we're looking here, so what we want to say to everyone, if you don't get any other message, is that yes, you can have a local impact on the climate and the microclimates around you. So if what we're looking at here, what's really important, and again, if you're in California or if you're in a place that's been impacted by fires, and you've heard a lot of us are now being really encouraged to take down trees, to hardscape, to put in landscape fabric. Again, we won't go against the experts necessarily, but want to offer this lens that by doing that, we're increasing the heat of our neighborhoods, literally. Okay, so
and continuing to dry out our soil so that it gets into that loop of drier and drier and unable to absorb.
So what we're looking at here, so here is a forest, and so this is Celsius. This is why it was so funny. We were talking with Carolina earlier. So let's see, let's start with the water. So just water. So this is the water in this picture here. It's just plain water. It's 26 degrees Celsius, or around 79. So it's pretty warm water, actually. It's probably pretty shallow in a particular area.
Pleasant for swimming.
Pleasant for swimming. And then look at the forest over here, which is over here. It's just a little bit warmer at 29 degrees Celsius or 84 Fahrenheit, right? So this is pretty good. And then just to compare, a wet meadow. So the wet meadow down here comes in at about 84 degrees Fahrenheit.
So about the same as the forest.
About the same as a wet meadow is about the same as a forest. Now a harvested meadow,
probably taken down to nearly just soil.
See how it's pretty.
It looks really bare.
It's pretty bare right here. Yeah. So this gets all the way to 108 Fahrenheit or 42.5 degrees Celsius, right? So this is what we're looking at. But now look at the asphalt. Look at the asphalt here. So the asphalt is up to 109 degrees Fahrenheit or 42, 43 Celsius. Yeah. So we share this because of when we're thinking about creating spaces and we're thinking about the future, in order to cool down our climate and our microclimates first, we need to start to think on this level, like, well, how are we creating more areas of wet meadow? How are we maintaining forests rather than cutting them down? How are we understanding the fact that, when we're here again, California, we want rain, but if rain falls on asphalt, it evaporates right away.
Or drains off
and goes out into the storm drains, out into the oceans or the sewage system, right? Yeah. But if we're creating areas like this meadow, and this doesn't have to be meadow, this can be a garden that you tend, this can be your local park, this can be places. We all need to be advocating for moist soil, diversity of plants, and the ability for our landscapes to hold water, which cools everything down, which allows then, we'll talk about it in a moment, which allows then rain to fall. Right. Yeah. In Los Angeles, where I'm from right now, they're saying, oh, and I don't know that this is actually true. It's my mother actually said this to me, but it's not supposed to rain for like 4 years, like a heavy rain for 4 years, because there's a heat dome right?
So what causes the heat dome?
What causes the heat dome is all of the pavement, all of the asphalt, the lack of trees, the lack of green, and the lack of the ability for the landscape in large cities to small cities to be able to hold water.
That's right. So the coolest temperatures on this infrared photo are the open water, the moist soil, and the plants which have moisture in them. So it's not that you have to have open water everywhere in order to have a cool environment. You just have to be recognizing that the soil and the plants are these links that allow the water to cycle and do its job, which is to cool us, right? And plants have the most amazing capacity to move moisture from the soil through their bodies, release it as water vapor up into the atmosphere, where it can then recondense and fall as rain.
Exactly.
Yeah. And in a healthy,
Go ahead.
in a healthy landscape, 2/3
Yeah.
of the rain that falls and gets absorbed by plants and is evapotranspired, that's what you call it when they're releasing water vapor, 2/3 of that water falls again in the same locale.
Right.
Right.
So think about that. People think that rain is this random, odd,
Traveled from far away,
event
too
that came
far
from
away.
far away,
Yes.
maybe from too far away, when actually we can actualize and create microclimates in our communities where the rain is more likely to be able to fall and will not get predicted. And as we say, just happen, right? Well, your app tells you it's going to rain, and then
It never does.
you're like, it's not raining here.
Yeah.
It happened. So,
Yeah.
so we're wanting. That's what we want to do. And then with permaculture and the permaculture strategies we're about to introduce to you, we can do it. And we want
Yes.
you to all feel lit up and inspired.
And just in some of these other infrared photos that we've been looking at, they have comparisons of, say, an umbrella or a shade structure to a tree, and they can't hold a candle to the tree. I mean, the tree is so much better because it's actually taking the solar radiation and converting it into water vapor instead of just blocking a little bit of it, right? It's like this much more complex way of moving heat. And whoa, guess what? Plants in soil that has water in it are the way that the planet has evolved to stabilize its climate, to move heat off the surface and send it back up into the atmosphere through the production of rain. So it's a miraculous and beautiful process that we can re-embrace and work with. Yeah.
Woohoo, right?
Yay.
Okay. So let's move on. Okay, so we wanted to go in and talk through really some regenerative practices that we use in
our work.
permaculture and the work that we do. So again, we're feeding the soil, we're planting water, we're facilitating plants, and we're balancing climate elements. And you can do this too. So we're going to talk through some of these. Do you want to read this last one here?
Sure.
Yeah.
So here's another Donella Meadow quote. Everything we think we know about the world is a model. Our models do have a strong congruence with the world, but our models fall far short of representing the real world fully.
Yeah, we just thought that was really, for this particular talk around systems and cycles around soil, water, and plants, that we come in contact with a lot of people who think they know about soil, and they really believe they understand the water cycle and systems, and they really believe they understand how plants work. And they have really clear models that they've even been taught, that they've either been taught in school, which we all have been given some less than accurate information around these three areas. So they think they know about it, but it's really just a model. And so again, our job, which we mentioned at the beginning, or what we get to do, is take those models and understand them and offer them additional information about understanding entire cycles.
Right. And we really want to create a space where people feel that joy of discovery and can get back into that beginner's mind, because, when you think you know something, you are less receptive to new information because you already know it, right? So for us to help people break down those little barriers in themselves and rediscover the joy of new and
understanding things new, like being able to embrace that part of the mandala, which is air, which is paradox, which is, whoa, this is true and that's true. So getting someone there and really juicy. And we're just going to say right there, that's one of the practices we don't have up here is singing and humming. And a lot of what we do, we incorporate singing and humming for the very reasons that Lydia was just alluding to, is that when we're singing and when we're humming and we're creating new synapses, it actually opens up our minds, our brains, our hearts to receive new new ways of thinking. So just if you find yourself stuck on something once at some point, maybe just try getting out and humming a little ditty or getting a song together. So just gonna, that is definitely a regenerative practice.
That's
as well.
right. And as Anne mentioned before, every situation is unique. So we can't go in with this recipe that's kind of has us closed, like this is the way you do it. We have to go in with a curiosity. And one of the things we say so often in our teaching is it depends, right?
Yeah.
Like, so what do I do here? Well, it depends. So what is the answer to this? Well,
It depends.
Yeah. And so one thing can be true and the opposite can also be true. And in maintaining our openness and our curiosity, we allow ourselves to be responsive to each situation instead of imposing what we think.
Right. And we could just go back to this on the very bottom, balance climate elements. We put here as our final thing, change the goal, and Danella Meadows spoke to that beautifully as well. And so with all of these cycles, we really want to change our goal. And the first goal is to actually observe in order to understand, in order to be able to respond, not react to whatever we're seeing, right? And for all of these cycles, we want to look at another principle, which is the least change for greatest effect, which is a permaculture principle. So what is the least thing I can do that will have the greatest effect in this system or in this cycle of soil, water, plants, and climate? Not unlike the leverage points that Danella also spoke to.
Exactly. So we came up with some additional words and concepts that flow through this alchemical mandala really nicely. And you can see them here. We have add structure, slow the rhythm, celebrate diversity, and then balance. And so these are the kind of overriding concepts for how we can look at each one of these aspects that move together. So structure, rhythm, diversity, and balance, right? They have a really nice flow and really help ground us through the process of the paradox and the transformation.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so we just wanted to highlight some of these, do-it-yourself practices. These are all practices. Yeah. And just to, as we can speak through, I'm just curious how many people know about all of these. But anyway, so feeding the soil. So again, now our new goal when we're interacting with soil is to feed it, not just water it. Watering it is good, right? But again, we're thinking of all, what is it? Nicole Masters, she is a soil scientist, and she talks about the soil in terms of underground herds of microbes, right? So that if you were really tiny, you were underground, it'd be really loud and there'd be so much going on because there's billions of microbes in our soil that need food and water and air. And when they have all that, that's when we have our best. So
that's when we have our best structure.
Our best structure.
Yeah.
So we're adding structure when we're feeding the soil. And some of the easiest ways to do this are composting. We'll talk about, I'll just go through the soil microbiome, which we were just referring to, understanding the carbon cycles, which was again, the photosynthesis into the stems, into the exudates, and then the idea of planting cover crops to just give the soil the nutrients that it needs.
That's right.
So composting, it's one of the easiest things that we can all do. And just to say, it's in California, we have, over 50% of what goes to landfill in the state of California is food scraps and yard waste, right? And then it goes into the landfill, and it actually is responsible for 41% of the methane gas that is produced in the state of California. So while cows are out there getting a bad rap, it's actually this disconnect, again, that people have with food scraps and laundry clippings, which we just see as future soil.
Right.
You look in your fridge, you need to clean it out. You just think future soil, future soil, future soil. I'm going to make soil with this. Right? It's so much better. And it's really true. You can pretty much take anything and make really beautiful, complex soil from what you have in your fridge.
That's right.
And there's lots of different ways of doing that. Maybe in the questions and answers, people will have more questions about that.
But composting is really just returning the carbon that you're responsible for to the soil so that the soil microbiome can cycle it back in and turn it into structure. And so it's just engaging with the carbon cycle.
Exactly. And the soil microbiome again. So there's soil microbes. So the soil microbes, people talk about this, the microbiota are all of the microbes, the millions and millions of microbes, which are bacteria, viruses, fungi, nematodes,
so
tardigrades, who we love.
And then the macro creatures like your earwigs and your roly-polies and your springtails and the earthworms and the things you can see, all dependent on this microscopic web that we can't see.
That we cannot see. Carbon cycles we talked about, and then cover crops. So cover crops are plants that we plant intentionally when there's an area of earth or soil where we want to bring more nutrients, or we want to bring more air, we want to bring more protection, more mulch, diversity. And a lot of us are familiar with just, you can get fava beans, for example, are a great cover crop, or red clover, or different things, and there's mixes. But check this out. Let's go back to celebrate diversity here. Because notice how cover crops is underfeed the soil, but they're also plants. So this speaks to our inability to really talk about them differently. But Dr. Christine Jones blew our minds when she said, yeah, people talk about cover crops and diversity and cover crop mixes, and there's like 6 different plants. And we're thinking, woohoo, not just fava beans. And she says, yeah, no, try for 60 different types of plants for your cover crop, because that is where the diversity in what we feed our soils and what we provide is key. So, again, we're not saying you have to run out and get 60 different kinds today, but, thinking about the impact of that. And that's how nature wants it to be. It wants to have 60 or more different types of plants, because again, if one fails, or if something happens to it, or a predator comes, or a pest comes and it dies, there's so many other things that take its place.
There are also ways that we can jumpstart the soil microbiome through making things like compost tea or microbe inoculants, which is where you're just kind of brewing a big population of bacteria, beneficial bacteria, and just watering with them, or even spraying them on the leaves of the plants to actually initiate. They're like probiotics for the soil and for the plants to initiate some of these cycles when you're really depleted.
Yeah, so we can add that to this slide.
Yeah.
So with planting water, again, the idea of planting water is the plants hold the soil together, create space for when the water falls, and it can be taken in. And we're really wanting to slow the rhythm of water. A lot of, again, of our mass culture, how we're dealing with water, especially now, which I don't understand. We can't understand why people are actually making it so that the water leaves their property faster. And so there may be some places where this is needed, but here in California, not so much. And so we're all about, okay, so if water is coming to you, how are you going to, and this is a permaculture phrase, slow it, spread it, and sink it.
Yeah.
How are you going to do it? Again, slowing down the water. So we talk a lot about harvesting water
with earthworks,
and also with roof catchment. And then there's gray water, which we mentioned earlier, and this idea of laundry to landscape. So these are some of the most accessible for everyone, right? Yeah.
We're talking about stuff you can do with a shovel, or ways that you can pile up material on a slope to keep the water from going so fast, right? To give it a chance to soak in. So many places the water is just moving so quickly, and the earth is so unreceptive that they just don't have the time to interact. So the water just leaves. And we've been managing our landscapes to enhance that on purpose or not for between 100 and 1,000 years, depending on how you look at it.
Okay, so I'm sure we'll have questions too. So the next one says facilitate plants, celebrate diversity in. So hedgerows. Hedgerows are an old technique that we really would love to bring back more and get into people's consciousness. And this is just a set of fences or places that are things that are impermeable. We want actually to create spaces where wind and water and wildlife can flow through them. And that is what a hedgerow is doing. And it's diverse. It can be tall trees and short shrubs and herbs and all types of things in it.
and things move through the hedgerows, but again, they're slowed down, right? The wind is slowed down through the hedgerows. The insects and the birds, they're like, oh, food. So they stop and they sit and they take a poop. And, you know, pollution from the air can be filtered out. Water flowing over ground can be slowed. And it's like a above ground harvest system for all of the things that we're passing through.
Right. Like we like to call the hedgerows sometimes the swales for the air and for the beings in the air. Also, so food forests, which we talked about, which is just not necessarily an orchard, right? But really a place where all beings, so many different types of beings, and how many do you want and which ones, what can you plant? How can you be diverse? What natives will bring who you want to have. And just putting a plug in for bees, for our native North American bees, we have about 2,800 that are native to North America, 2,800 different types of bees. In the Santa Cruz Mountains, we have at least 600 just in the Santa Cruz Mountains alone. So we're quite blessed with the diversity of our native bees, and our native bees need our native plants for their food and for their habitat. And anybody who has a bee phobia, we just want to quell that a tiny bit and say that most bees do not sting. Honeybees sting, and most of the other ones don't. They're ground dwelling. And we have a lot of favorite native bees that we intentionally plant for. And so it'd be really, you know, we invite you to look in your area if you don't know it already and say like, oh, what are my native songbirds? What are my native bees? What are my native butterflies? And see what they like. Yeah. What habitat do they like? And how can you create that as an invitation for them to join you? Because believe us, it works.
We bring
it really works. So, and there's nothing more fun than sitting out and just seeing the ones you invited just flitting by, right? Saying, hey, oh, and hummingbirds we didn't mention, and your local hummingbirds.
And in addition to having the flowers that they want to pollinate or the things they want to feed on, they need places to make their nests for the various life stages. They like to pupate and have a grub phase often. And so these food forests have the high layer and the mid layer and the low layer, and places for somebody to burrow into a stem or make their home in the little dead leaves at the bottom. And so this is also a really essential part of changing the way we manage our gardens to embrace that sort of messiness and that integration.
Okay, awesome. So a little aside on natives and bees, because we love them. And then, so the last one, which we started on, was a balance our climate elements. And that's just basically this, you know, how can we work together and de-silo, right? So de-silo soil, water, and plants, and really engage with them collectively and co-create habitats for so many more than just human beings.
Yeah, when you look at these regenerative practices, you'll see that they actually do benefit all of these 4 elements, not just the one that we have them listed under. So the goal is to find practices that address the problems on all levels, not just that address one problem.
Right. And then the initial goal, as we mentioned earlier, is just actually to slow down, observe, and observe.
Yeah.
And breathe. So we're going to stop sharing right now. Right. That's our last one. Stop share. And seems like there's some questions in the chat. We wanted to have breakout rooms now, and we had sent you all, can we do this one? We had sent some question for the breakout rooms, and we're wondering, Carolina, if we can change
the question.
Change the question to be, well, maybe it's just, we kind of thought it would be fun to ask people to talk about in their breakout rooms. You know, we're talking a lot about changing the goal. What type of goal change would you see necessary for yourself, right, in addressing these? Yeah. And then if you have time, so what goals do you see that you might be changing around plant, soil, and water? And then if you feel like, what strategies or what did you hear us talking about today that really lit you up, that you feel you could go forward with? Does that sound good?
Yes, I think that sounds great. So I think we always invite folks to chat about what they're inspired from what they hear from the question. So I think hearing from you and changing the question, there's absolutely no problem. So I think I'm just gonna, the breakout rooms are ready. So I'm just gonna send folks into it. We'll have around 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll have time for more time for questions and answers, and also for some sharings from the breakouts.
So for clarification, could I just invite us to repeat the question one more time before people go into the breakout rooms?
Yeah. So apologies too, because you have a different one. So our question for you is, what goal or goals, right, might you need to change for yourself around soil, water, plants, climate in order to go forward? And if you have time, and maybe even why, or and what are any strategies or things that we spoke about today that that lit you up that you could move forward with? Get off the call today and go out and
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Wonderful. I'm going to open the breakout rooms now. So folks, if you have any trouble, you can come back at any time. And please enjoy.
Great. So I think we're going to continue with a sharing from the breakouts if you guys want to harvest. And then we'll move into our official Q&A.
All right. Does anybody want to share what came up in their breakout room? You can just unmute yourself and share with everybody. We'd love to hear. Don't all jump at once.
So
talk.
I'll share. Myrna has a wonderful project with black soldier flies, and how they break down poop.
Yep.
And she's experimenting with that and trying to make it a viable project. So that's kind of interesting and fun.
Really,
Yeah, they eat meat too. If you have a lot of meaty compost or animal tissue that you need to process. Yeah.
Sweet. And Carla, did you want to, or Catherine, are you complete?
I just said I was really jazzed by the whole idea of hedgerows for replacing urban fences. I thought that was, I mean, as long as my urban wildlife is going around my fences anyway, I might as well put in a hedgerow and stop. And because fences are incredibly expensive, they're thousands of dollars to replace. So the thought of just making a hedgerow and growing it up is awesome. I love that idea.
And fences actually create like super like rough eddies in the wind, you know, because they're so solid, the wind has to get pushed up and over, and then it comes back, and it's actually not serving the protective effect that most people are looking for.
Yeah. Awesome. Anyone else? Some little ahas from your D.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I need to say I just finished up a 9-month course with these gals, Vital Cycles, and it was really transformative. It was amazing. I think that what they do, I'm just so stoked to be a part of their work. And I think what they do best is take this really complex problem that we all, I think, sometimes can go into denial about and feel shame about how much we are not doing, or maybe just not even look at it. And they bring it, embody it, they walk the talk, but they embody it, and they bring practices that everyone can grasp in their own way, and truly feel hopeful about this really devastating at the world, you know, our world's crisis. So I'm happy to answer. I kind of I spoke a lot in our breakout room about just the excitement and the hope, and that idea of getting out of our heads and really having true advice and true practical skills. So
Thanks,
Thanks,
Steve.
Dee.
Suparna, would you be willing to share what you shared in our breakout about the rain and all that?
Yep, absolutely. I was actually wanting to thank you, Felicia. So what stuck out for me was I was listening to this from this lens of human relationships and human relational systems. And so the thing you said about the water not being able to soak in when the soil is dry was pretty interesting, because in tandem, I'm doing this course on nonviolent communication, and the practices were reflecting what are the moments we're able to bring patients to interactions versus not. And in those reflections, my personal reflection was, I learned healthful behaviors when I've had some experience with healthful interactions. If I have kind of short interactions day in and day out repeatedly where I'm unheard, I feel my blood pressure rising, I feel myself absorbing bad behaviors, and then I basically engage in those behaviors even when the other person is being patient. And so the way is having enough of those healthful interactions, kind of like nurturing myself, like drinking that gulp of water, right? Nurturing my soil, so then I can bring that behavior to other interactions. And so it's really cool to hear you say that. And I've observed it in my garden, right? Like when I just like dump a lot of water, that's exactly what happens. So that was just a natural thing. Yeah, that it's just so cool to see those two ideas kind of tied together the same way for humans as for plants.
Exactly. That's beautiful. And that is actually, that's so beautiful. That's exactly what we like to do in our Vital Cycles course too, is just make those, and that's a beautiful one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, another one of our students pointed out this analogy with water infiltration as well. Like, oh, when she has been doing the research and learning and spending the time and softening herself, then she is more receptive to new information. Whereas her neighbor, whose yard management practices maybe seem alien and unintegrated to her, this person hasn't had that opportunity to become more porous, to soften her own soil of receptivity. And so that gave her compassion, okay, well, you don't have your swales, you don't have your mulch, you don't have your soil microbiome yet. And so, right. And so you will be receiving more information soon. From me. You'll be more receptive. Yes. So the parallels are so rich and really exciting.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Klarna.
Thank you.
Great. So we're at our official Q&A, 5 minutes or so. So we're going to have our Q&A, and we'll start with a couple of questions that were posted in the chat earlier. And then Carrie is going to thank our partners, and then we will wrap up, including letting you know about our next talk. So we had a question. We've had 2 questions in the chat, at least, that I noticed. Somebody asked about, let's see, early on, trying to find it.
We wrote down some.
What was that? Oh, you wrote them down. Okay, please go ahead. Oh, soap in the gray water. That was one of them. And possibilities to measure the quality of the soil without sending a probe to a lab.
Yes. So the quality of the soil, there are lots of different ways that you can assess the quality of your soil without sending it away to a lab. I mean, if you're looking for, contamination, like lead poisoning or different types of contamination, then that kind of needs a lab. That needs a lab. So if you're thinking that, there's a lot you can really just tell with your own senses. It's just like an enhanced process of observation. You can see the structure in the soil. You can see if there are roots and other things moving through it, and bugs and life, and just a general sense of activity in there. You can smell it. Does it smell like metallic and chemically, or does it smell like life? Right. Does it hold water? Right. Yeah. Can you, when you water it with a hose, is something sinking in or not? Right. Like we just worked at a place this weekend. We dug a huge swale with a large group of people in a class we're doing, and we didn't see. There were no bugs. Yeah. There were no bugs. There were no worms. There were no beetles. There were no spiders. There was nothing. And people commented on it. So it's not to say that soil is, well, it's not alive. Right. Right. So you can do that. And then there's just the percolation tests, right? So you can dig a hole about like a foot deep, foot by foot. Pour some water in there, see how fast it absorbs. It doesn't necessarily tell you about the life in the soil, but it's related, you know. And then the soil jar test. Again, that's about more structure, but it's mostly just looking for the life, seeing the activity, see if there are pore spaces in the soil, or does it look like flour, right? What does it resemble? Yeah. A scone? Or a pot? Exactly. We want to go for the scone, with some raisins and some pore, some life and yumminess happening. Yeah. And then there was,
sorry, go ahead. You were going to answer the soap one.
Yeah, the soap in the gray water. So we get this all the time. I mean, There are so many really cool soaps out there that you really don't need to worry about putting in your gray water. And
Yeah.
even something like a Tide, you know, if it's not all the time,
Yeah.
it'll be okay.
And mostly where you release the gray water, you're releasing it into an area that you dug the soil out of and filled with some sort of organic matter, usually wood chips. So it's going into this kind of pre-filter, and then from there it moves into the soil. And once the soil is full of all that life and those organisms, it's like a huge buffer. So if there is a little bit of toxin in your Tide or whatever shampoo a guest used or something, it's generally able to be processed by the soil. If you're hammering it again and again and again with some really harsh stuff, you will notice that the system starts to decline or degrade, but it's pretty forgiving. It's a lot more forgiving than people think.
Right. Yeah.
And Alexa mentioned humanure.
Yeah. Oh, humanure. Right. So we did not talk about humanure, but we
Yes.
could. Yes. Humanure is great. We can send you, if you want to go, gosh,
We
which
can
was.
Occidental Arts and
We can send, the
yeah.
Occidental Arts and Ecology Center has some great information, composting toilets and humanure. And yeah, again, there were so many things we could talk about, but we love that you brought that. So
yeah.
thank you so much.
There's a great quote by Brock Dolman, who's a very popular permaculture figure in California and a member of the Occidental Arts and Ecology community. And he says, we need to shit in the carbon cycle, not in the water cycle. So
yeah,
that kind of says it all.
Shift that paradigm, why don't you?
Yeah.
Why are you putting it in the clean water and sending it out to sea?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And then Brian asked about composting approaches for citrus peels.
Right. So we just put them in the compost.
Don't worry about it.
You shouldn't. I mean, you could cut them up smaller. You could try, you know, depending on the type of compost system that you're using. Are you outside? Are you in a container? What are you using? There's a really cool, we're still experimenting with it, a cool method called bokashi that's from Japan. That's meant to be done inside in small scale. And it's an anaerobic breaking down. You still have to cut it up small, but it breaks it down pretty quickly. And then you can just go bury it out in the garden, actually.
Pre-treating with some of the inoculant sprays that we make ourselves that are cheap and easy, that can also help. And then we recently read somebody who was doing herbal work. They dry their citrus peels and then they boil them, like to make a decoction. And then once they've been through that process, they break down super fast. So, I mean, depending on what you're into.
What's your goal?
Yeah.
What's the goal?
Yeah. But mostly they just take a little bit longer and they're not really an issue. They just are a little slower.
Yeah. Might have to keep them in this for a little bit longer.
Even in worm bins, worms don't love them, but they're still going to break down.
Right. And then we saw the invitation from AJ for localizingcaliforniawaters.org, and we signed right up for that newsletter. And we will be planning to find out more and hopefully join next year.
We have known about it, but we were not able to make it this year. And then planting mini forests, somebody brought that up.
Yeah. So that's possibly talking about the Miyawaki method. And again, we couldn't bring everything in, but definitely planting mini forests.
It's a great new book by a gal named Hannah Lewis about Miyawaki forests. And it's really just advocating for small, intense, diverse, based on native plants, forest plantings that can really quickly reach a stage of maturity and functionality that is what we need. So it's a doable, small scale, community applicable. Yes.
Yeah. So yes.
We say yes.
Yep. Any other question?
I think the last question in here was from Suparna in the chat. Do you have a recommendation for someone doing work on human systems? I'd read The Hidden Lives of Trees and that was helpful.
The Hidden Half of Nature.
Hidden Half of Nature
goes very deeply into just the gut microbiome, soil microbiome connection. That's really lovely.
They have a new book coming out too. That's David Montgomery and Anna Bikley. They have another one coming out that does that even, that has more of the human ecology piece.
Yeah, it's called
thinking for
What Your Food Ate, I think.
What Your Food Ate.
What Your Food Ate, I think is what it's called.
I didn't know
or
that.
what your soil ate, something like that.
Yeah, it's cool. And otherwise, no, we'll think on that though. And if we can, we'll think on that. And if we can send some resources out to y'all.
So I just want to invite everybody to unmute yourselves so we can applaud for our speakers today. Thanks, everybody.
All of you.
Thanks for joining us. So we're just gonna. Oh yeah, go ahead, Carrie.
Sorry. Is it okay if I say
Yeah.
my little spiel? Okay.
Yes, please.
Well, I too am just blown away, Anne and Lydia, by this conversation. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for joining us. I wanted to just take a moment to contextualize this conversation, which is the last in a series of 6 total for this year. We have one final conversation coming up in the new year, which Carolina is going to tell you about and post in the chat. But Felicia and Carolina and I have been working together, I don't know, close to 2 years now, trying to reimagine how systems thinkers might work together more effectively. And this is one of the first sort of artifacts, I guess, of that project. We call ourselves a system of systems thinkers. And we are interested in, to your point, Lydia, the de-siloing of the systems thinking field. Okay, sorry. Anyway, so this whole notion of de-siloing the systems thinking field, who would have imagined that the systems thinking field itself would fall into the same, traps that many of us fall into in our silos. So we invite you to, I know a number of you have been here before, but if you haven't been here before, we invite you to explore the recorded conversations from the prior events that are all available on the website. We've had an incredible diversity of women in systems thinking speaking throughout the year to honor this 50th anniversary of Donella Meadows' authorship of the book Limits to Growth. And to remember her and her work and the ideas that are still so poignantly apropos right this minute. And so thank you both for evoking those quotations in your presentation and for honoring her, and I want to believe she's in the mix here with us in the ether. So I'm grateful to my partners and to all of you for coming, and I'll hand it back to Felicia and Carolina to close us out.
Great. Any final bits, Carolina, before we close?
Just one final note that, as usual, in between conversations, we do organize one session that we call the peer discussion. So these longer sessions in the series are more focused on listening from our wonderful systems thinkers, and they're always very rich in ideas and new thoughts and content. And these other 1-hour sessions are just the opportunity to discuss among ourselves some of these new ideas and share with each other. So then I'm going to share also in the chat the registration for this one, which will be on the 13th of December for anyone wishing to join and keep discussing this. At the same time as our session started today, so 10 a.m. Pacific. And finally, just a huge thank you to Anne and Lydia. This was a really wonderful and again, very rich conversation. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation. Thank you to everyone who joined and contributed their thoughts, and to Carrie and Felicia for being there always and for doing this together.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy
Thank you, Lydia
holidays,
and Anne.
everyone. And thank you, Lydia and Anne, so much. Thank you.
Awesome.